Hello and welcome to the brand new American Reformation podcast with Tim Allman and Eric Fish. We long to see the wider American Christian church fall more in love with Jesus by learning from the practices of the early church and other eras of discipleship multiplication. We want to hear from you. Make sure you comment and leave a review wherever you're watching or listening to tell us what God is doing in your life or how you feel about today's conversation. Lord, have your way in us. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the American Reformation Podcast. Tim Allman here, Eric Fish. We back soon. I have with me my good just about lifelong friend, Dr. Ryan Bredow. I never use doctor with you, nor do you with
Sounds
I.
very
But let me
official.
tell you just a little bit about Ryan and why this is going to be a fun conversation today. He is a multi-decade Lutheran educator. Actually was a high school basketball coach at my alma mater. Won a state title there for the Lutheran Lights, go Lights. Then spent some time in Milwaukee. He is a brand expert. We're going to be talking about brand today. He's a coach, consultant, speaker, husband and father of 3 kids in Gilbert, Arizona, and currently is employed at Grand Canyon University. Lives just a few blocks from my house. And I got to thinking, Ryan's been on Lead Time a number of years ago, but Ryan hasn't been on American Reformation. So let's kick it off this way. The American Reformation Podcast, Eric Fish and our guests, we've talked a lot about kind of our frustration, sadness with the decline of the American church, Ryan, in 2023 and beyond. We pray that that trend reverses, that more knees bend to Jesus. But in what ways, Bud, are you praying for reformation in the Christian church here in America?
Well, first of all, Tim, thanks for having me. The way that you continue to champion the growth of our church is so remarkable. So I'm just honored to be a friend and a supporter at Christ Greenfield.
Thanks, bro.
And along the lines of that question, not to sound overly simplistic, but for me, it would really just come down to unity. That Satan just comes to, as we know, to come to divide, seek and destroy. And so I think a common prayer for me is straight out of John 17. I mean, that our church, that we can be one in our efforts and just find common ground from which to seek and save the lost. And so I know there's a myriad of places that are doing that remarkably well. And so just prayers for more action like that.
Isn't that right? And human beings by nature, and this is because of our sin nature, Ryan, love to divide over small stuff. And I guess in this season of life for me, and I pray it's until the Lord calls me home, I pray that I keep the main thing, that it's about elevating the name of Jesus, living a life that glorifies him, loving and praying for those who I disagree with. People are not my enemy, Satan is the enemy, death is the enemy, the world, the flesh is the enemy, but people created in the image of God are not my enemy, whether they're within my church body or of another worldview. Let's talk worldview a little bit. How would you define like a biblical worldview and what that means for just how you live life as a Jesus follower in 2023?
Well, first I have to say, as you were commenting earlier, it quickly reminded me of a number of years ago. I served as an admissions director back at Lutheran High School in Colorado. And I used to have, to your point, Tim, I used to have a marker board right behind my desk that simply said major in the majors, minor in the minors. Now, I know that may sound cliche, but you can imagine in that role, I was interacting with hundreds of families who came to Lutheran High with hundreds of stories and ways in which the Lord had been at work in their life and experiences that they had in the church or not, positive or negative. And so I just want to echo your sentiment to continue to have a filter that says, how would Christ see these people? And how can I find ways to make connection because we know that it's through relationship that change happens. And so
That's right.
I guess from that perspective, a worldview that leads like Christ led and called us to lead. Again, I'm not trying to sound cliche here. I feel like the older I get, the more simplistic I'm seeking life to be. And from that perspective, I think we sometimes make it more confusing than it really is. The charge of Christ is pretty simple. Living it out is very difficult. But certainly just keeping it keenly focused on loving lenses.
Mm-hmm. It's awesome, dude. Have you heard of Hermeticism? Is that something you've ever heard about?
Sneeze? I don't.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's from the Greek god Hermes, and it actually goes back to like ancient Egyptian mysticism, Hermeticism, and some of Freemasonry, and there's even some components in the LDS, Latter-day Saints theology, which make this distinction that the Creator has a creation, but creatures can become creators and one with, if you will, the divine Godhead. So this distinction is really helpful, I think, for Orthodox Christians. Is there's a God and I'm not him. I'm the creature, he's the creator, and I'm a part of his story, but I will never become the creator. Some of the roots of Hermeticism are, and you see this today in our culture, man, that mankind can solve, you name the problem. That mankind can solve, global warming, that mankind can solve, the gender confusion today, if we just allow that mankind can really bring wholeness and fix sin, if you will, that we can ascend to. This is what Hermeticism says. Let me get a little deeper, is that there is this singularity, which is the Logos or God, right? And our goal is to help God become more full and whole, to bring God together. So within me is this divine spark. Within you, Ryan, is this divine spark. And our spirits are eternal. And so as we even leave and move from body to body, there's some reincarnation tendencies here. We all are helping to make God more whole. A lot of people are living like this. So like you becoming the best version of you, me becoming the best version of me, it gives a spark of the divine. Have you thought about that at all? I mean, it is rampant in our world right now. Let me finish this. Many philosophers right now are saying that form of spirituality that mankind can fix and become like the creator or like God. This is Genesis chapter 3 stuff. You can become like God. Did God really say that? This is more dangerous than radical secularism? Because if you go down the radical secularism line, Ryan, all you're left with is radical hedonism, pleasure at all costs, or radical nihilism. There's no hope, there's no meaning, eat, drink, be merry, might as well take my own life. My life means nothing. The Christian worldview is the best thing going. There's a creator, I'm his creation, I'm connected to Christ, he is the divine Logos. I will never be like him, and yet by grace through faith, I'm connected to this divine story. But I can't raise myself from the dead. Thankfully, Jesus came to do that. So yeah, any thoughts on, I know just kind of rambling, I've been wrestling with, it's a new form of Gnosticism in many respects, but it's really actually very, very old, that our ultimate goal is to leave the body and attain a heightened spiritual reality. That's a bunch of mumbo jumbo. So yeah, I love the biblical story and it being a Jesus follower. Any response to that?
Just the picture that you're painting, my initial response is that it sounds awfully scary to me, largely because it doesn't seem to leave much room for forgiveness. I mean, my fallen nature is in front of me all of the time. And so the fact that Christ's mercies are new every morning is something that's impossible to quantify. Mm-hmm. And so the picture you're painting almost removes that from the equation, that I can achieve or pursue realities that go far beyond my own capacity. So clearly, that I think that's what saddens me, is that Christ came for the broken, and that's everybody. And so common ground being you're broken just like me, but we have a Savior who takes care of that. Nothing replaces that piece.
That's right. I have this sense that people in our culture are sliding into pessimism and cynicism. You see it, you hear it, it's toxic, and it happens in an overly secular culture or in a highly Gnostic, even spiritual culture that removes Christ. You're one of the most joyful people I know, Ryan. How do you defeat pessimism and cynicism and maintain joy as a Jesus follower?
Well, first of all, that's a high compliment. I certainly have my low moments. There's no doubt about that. But one thing that comes to mind when I get asked about joy or just kind of an approach to life, for me personally, and this is true, I think, for a lot of people that, or at least pursuing a healthy sense of self, is that it starts in the home, and it started in the home with me. You've had the opportunity to meet my mother, Tim. She is the most loving person on the planet.
She is.
And so growing up with loving parents, an awesome older brother, I honest to goodness have just felt fortunate to always be surrounded by loving and supportive people. And it seems that for those that I encounter that are struggling maybe in that area of their life, it often seems tethered to fear. And so maybe a different way to posture that question is, where does sort of fearlessness come from? I think those two are connected. That's my own opinion. I don't have a bunch of research to back that up, but it seems that people that live with a high sense of joy also have found ways to keep fear in its proper perspective. And for me personally, it's just this knowing that even if I fail at something, I have a Savior who's locked in my identity through my relationship with Him. And then I have people around me, friends and family, that love and support me regardless. And so I think that sort of tethered infrastructure has been so critical in my life through church and through Christian education and other areas that there's no doubt that that's what's formed my passion for my current vocation, because I don't know where I would be if it weren't for that quote unquote firm foundation.
I love that connection to fearlessness and joy. I think that's exactly true. Where there's heightened, the perfect love of God, which love equals joy, casts out fear. And because we're tethered to this amazing God who has a grand story of which we're a part, and He's never letting go of us, we don't have anything to be afraid of. And that's the amazing thing about Jesus. When He stepped out of the tomb, the awe and wonder of the disciples, seeing Jesus in the flesh, being there at His ascension, receiving the power of the Holy Spirit that led the disciples to surrender their lives. You can take my body. Jesus will raise it back up again. And 2.0 is going to be a heck of a lot better than 1.0. And so I can therefore be very, very bold in just how I live and how I love. I don't have to worry that much about what people think about me. You know, I think that's the thing that a lot of Jesus followers spend far too much time concerned about, what other people think about them, what they're saying about them when they're not in the room. And we desperately need to raise up a next generation of kids who are more joyful and less fearful. So let's talk about kids. You've been in education, Ryan, for a long period of time. You're an excellent communicator, and now in the Grand Canyon community, doing all you can to bless Christian schools across the country. So what, with the rise of school choice here in Arizona, it's a unique place to be. And if you're not listening in Arizona, we can talk about some of the tax credits and kind of grant programs and a number of different things that are coming through Arizona. One of the most progressive states in the union, probably the most progressive place for school choice, and Christian education is on the rise here. So what is surprising to you about what's happening in the Christian school landscape across the country, Ryan?
Well, it's a great question, Tim. A couple things that come to mind. First of all, I know for us at GCU, and I know many in the Christian school landscape would echo this sentiment, and that is that I believe there's no greater time in the history of the world to grow Christian education than now. And I'm not trying to own that statement. I've heard others, other leaders in the Christian ed space echo that commentary, and it seems that largely, kind of anchored around two disciplines: affordability and accessibility. As Christian schools become affordable through various choice opportunities, but then also the number of deliveries of Christian education that are growing, the access to what that looks like and how it's defined is really growing. So it is a very unique space. Certainly, as you said, in Arizona, we've had choice at some level, school choice at some level for quite some time, and yet many still don't know about it. And so, much like many of our efforts in the church, and certainly in Christian education, much work needed around messaging and getting the word out about the value that exists in those systems. And certainly we need, I want to be super clear here, Tim, we need great schools everywhere. You and I both have a number of friends, family, and so forth that are remarkable Christ followers that have forever felt led and called to public district schools. So I want to be really clear. It doesn't have to be an either or here.
That's right.
But rather just the growing opportunities that parents are having to say, here's what might fit best for my child or our family's relative circumstance is really exciting. And so I think it's incumbent upon Christian ed leaders to be aware of the landscape and then continue to innovate ways in which we can connect the gospel to kids and families and communities through Christian education. Obviously, the Lord works through a myriad of different disciplines. It's not just within Christian education, but probably to your question, that's going to continue to be a key element. Is how can we, kind of that famous quote, when the speed of change around you is faster than the speed of change within you, you can quickly become irrelevant from an organizational perspective. I think that ways in which education can continue to innovate alongside school choice will position Christian education to continue to grow, which for you and I, Tim, in our lifetime has not happened holistically. And so it really becomes a special time, but also critical in terms of how we discern and take care of what's coming.
Yeah, I have this dream. Thanks for that. I have this dream of a rising tidal wave of young people, girls and boys, from a younger age than I think many of us have experienced in our lifetime, saying, you know what? My life is sold out to letting people know about the gospel. So whether that means becoming a full-time pastor or a businessman or woman with a kingdom lens, I think that there's going to be a rising tide of young people who look at the hedonism and the pluralism, secularism of this day and say that doesn't appear to be working. Like suicide rate, drug rate, all this kind of stuff. I'm seeing about the fentanyl overdose stuff. It's like, we are not thriving collectively as a people, especially here in America. And I think a number of our young people are going to be positioned to say, here am I, like Isaiah, send me. So,
Tim, I want to interject and I'll speak as a father. You of course are as well. For me, this is just speaking for myself as a parent. In light of what you just shared, all these increased rates of anxiety and social pressures and challenges that adolescents face that feels like it just continues to be at an increasing rate, I don't know about you, Tim, but I find myself then saying, I want and need more Christ for my kids, especially considering as our kids enter like junior high. Yours are a little bit older, but mine, junior high and as they enter high school. I read now that over 60%, if not in many cases more, percent of a high school kid's time is spent in or with their high school environment. Then you throw in sports, I quickly realized, Tim, like I'm outnumbered. Like the percentage, literally just mathematically, the percentage of influence of time that I have is becoming less and less as my kids get older. And so I feel like I'm just becoming even more discerning around like, man, who's speaking life into my kid? Who are these various influencers because of, again, the pressures and the challenges that they face. And so, again, I know every parent's making the best decision they can for their own kid. I'm just speaking for myself. Like, man, this is, it just reinforces to me the power of community, the power of church involvement, and just continuing to just have Christ at the center of these just pivotal years for their life. Certainly, I'm echoing this as an adult as well, but as you reference children, that continues to resonate for me as a father.
Yeah, I agree, bro. It's a hard time to be a kid, and we need more of Jesus and Jesus people around our kids, and whatever that takes. And I think both in the secular sphere and as well as those that were within a Christian school or church environment, more is better for sure. So let's
we need it everywhere. That is not
need it everywhere. No, Jesus is
comment. We just need Christ everywhere.
Exactly.
In all the communities, yeah.
So you're a brand guy. Brand, as you define, is what people say about you when you're not in the room, and you can give. We don't want to get too tactical here. We would love to just stay a little bit higher level, but GCU, observing GCU now here in the Valley, and its robust explosion. It's unlike many universities in the country. It's remarkably innovative. You've got a not-for-profit, a for-profit side in GCE and GCU. So how does GCU and GCE, for those of you who don't know, Grand Canyon Education, which is what you're connected to, isn't that right, GCE? And then you've got the university, both the online and the in-person side of the university, which is still a not-for-profit kind of. Isn't that the way it works, Ryan? Mm-hmm. So how does GCU monitor and grow their respective brand at such a rapid rate? It's pretty extraordinary.
Well, it really is a God story, Tim. So I can answer that, reflecting the work of many other people. I hope that goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. It's the Lord at work through some tremendous leaders and a remarkable number of people. And just like in your leadership, Tim, at Christ Greenfield and your work within the LCMS, as you and I have often said, vision comes first. And what are we ultimately trying to accomplish? And so much of the brand identity at GCU and the build out of our brand starts with vision. And clearly, when President Mueller, who happens to be a Concordia Seward grad, as both you and I know, came to GCU, that was about 14 years ago. The goal was, how can we make private Christian higher education affordable and accessible to all socioeconomic classes of society, and do that without compromising excellence, and certainly building it around a sense of Christian community. So I think it doesn't start with like fun vernacular or logos and these sorts of things that are important clearly, but that often get kind of minimized into defining brand. But rather it's more about experience. What type of experience are you looking to create, in our case, for students, for families, for the communities that we serve, even from an organizational perspective, like for our faculty and those that serve within the organization. It really has to start with, what vision are we trying to to work towards. And what does it look like to execute that? And so I don't want to just be 30,000 feet being too high there, but I think sometimes that gets skipped. What type of experience are we ultimately looking to create? And so we had these foundational elements. And then as the university grew, which it is, to go from 900 students 14 years ago to roughly 25,000 students on our ground campus, roughly 90,000 online. I mean, if you're going to grow from 900 students to over 100,000 in those 14 years, we've found that actually our culture and sense of community have actually gotten stronger, which is really, it's really kind of a fascinating dynamic. But there's no doubt that doesn't happen if it's not modeled and led from the top. If we don't have, and our president and his team do this better than anybody, and then if we're not doing it in such a way that empowers our students to be able to take ownership and lead, and for them to really feel like this is theirs, those are all very, it's all very guided, and it's a very intentional. You see brands that are often elevated because of their experience. You take the Disneys, the Chick-fil-A's, Southwest Airlines. That's maybe untimely right now, but those types of experiences that they seek to create for those that they serve. That's done with great intention and with great care, and certainly at GCU, it's very much the same. So I guess I would encourage. We're very data driven, so having a high sense of clarity around what are we looking to communicate, and who are we looking to communicate to. And then directly tethered to that is consistency. You often hear, clarity and consistency breed credibility. That we have to work at this every day. So it's not something that just happens by chance. By no means is it perfect, but finding ways to harness all the people involved around a shared vision and catalyzing people within it to champion that mission. And for us, nobody does that better than our students. I'm sure a lot of schools say that, and it's true in a lot of schools, and we're no different. That seeing students live that out in such a remarkable way really becomes a motivator, because at the end of the day, it's all about students. It's all about kids. In our industry, it's all about kids and students and the families and communities they represent. So with high intention, we seek to create that type of experience for people that interact with GCU.
There's something in every human, and especially I'd say in the early years, that want to feel a part of something bigger, right? Obviously connected to God, but then connected to others, similar values, similar mission, similar heartbeat. And there's very little like the GCU basketball experience and what are they called, the Havocs, right?
Correct.
And these kids, the couple thousand kids or so, 2,000-3,000 that pack this arena one side and have these like synchronized, you can look it up, anybody that's listening, up on YouTube, the GCU Havocs, and there's synchronized dances during the game between timeouts and stuff, and these student leaders, many of whom over Christmas break hung out to even get the old, fuddy-duddy people who are still coming to the games to engage. Like it is very, very contagious, the joy that comes in being connected to something bigger than yourself. I think that's the brand that GCU is. That's the experience that a lot of kids are getting. It's way more than classes. It is this holistic, whoa. And if you can couple that, Ryan, with the gospel of Jesus Christ, the greatest story ever, that's a powerful catalyst for culture transformation as these kids are sent off to create culture through vision connected to the story of Jesus across the country and world. Isn't that right?
Well, yeah. And I would say, for what it's worth, Tim, in our circumstance, I would argue I don't think it exists without that. When you talk about that larger purpose, the work that Christ is doing through the mission and ministry at GCU and the students that are there, I don't think that you can remove that and then suggest that the brand, if you will, would be what it is. It truly is the fuel by which our community has said, we want to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And for you've been to our campus, the opportunities in our immediate community that surround our campus are a perfect example of that. We want to press into that, to bring that sense of joy and peace and understanding and all the things that kind of fuel that culture. That's got to go to the masses. So I'm glad you brought that up, Tim, because I don't think in our circumstance, removing Christ from that equation, it doesn't work. And it really was and continues to be, the focus is Christian education and what does that look like for students. The result now, much like the Lord works in many places, has gone far beyond what we would have ever thought. This is the Lord's doing. We're just doing our best to be good stewards with what's been entrusted to our care.
So let me play the skeptic here a little bit. We may have some pastors or church leaders, and they're like, brand? That's secular business. The church, like, we don't talk brand. But for those who are maybe not the skeptic and like, I want to know more, what does an average pastor leader in the church not understand about the necessity of understanding brand?
So I want to be really caring and supportive for many in our ecosystem, regardless of what the industry may be. It's not a person's fault necessarily for not understanding what. So I want people to kind of forgive themselves. They're feeling like, oh my gosh, I should know more about this. Why do I not know? Like that's, please don't feel that way. As I shared just a couple of thoughts, to break it down to its ultimate simplicity, to give it maybe a different vernacular. So much of quote unquote branding is communicating. I'm communicating based on what I choose to wear, right? Who I choose to hang around, what I choose to watch, how I choose to spend my money. Like, these are all decisions we're making that reflect who I am. And
values,
so
personal values.
To kind of remove that secular, it's not a scary buzzword, but you kind of hinted at it earlier. The definition that I like to refer to, brand is who you are, mission is what you do, vision is where you're going. So when you think about branding from an organization perspective, maybe just think about
identity.
What's the heart? Exactly. What's the identity of who I am? You and I are both sports fans, and there may be some other sports fans listening. We use this type of vernacular in sports. When someone says that's just their brand of football, right? Or whatever it may be, that's their style of play. Very similar sort of narrative exists around brand. Like if I walk onto Christ Greenfield, there's just a sense of identity that comes through my experience there. And how does that happen? It's not through me reading the mission statement. Of course, mission statements are possible, but it's when it's lived out through. I often share with schools and churches, your brand is the culmination of 1,000 small gestures. It's someone opening the door for you. It's a pleasant smile when they meet you at the door. It's a greeting secretary. It's, all these experiences inform an identity that you walk away with a feeling like, wow, that was impactful. There was something there. And so I guess that would be my encouragement to pastors is it's kind of a self-evaluation, but it's more of a cultural evaluation of what am I communicating? So I'll give you one hook, Tim. I know you're a big hook guy, so hopefully this is helpful. I'm a big champion that whoever tells a story creates a culture. And so one way to unpack that is to start looking at segments within your church or within your school and say, what's the story? And I'll use a school example, but you can apply it in church. What's the story of our arts program? Who's telling it? How's it being told? What's the story of our athletics program? Who's telling it? How's it being told? What's the story of our hallways? What's the story of the cleanliness of our facility? How would people describe that story? What narrative comes to mind is one way to start to evaluate it. I get passionate about this, Tim, because as you and I both know, a lot of times people oversimplify it and say it's a name, for example, or it's an image or a logo. And again, these are extremely important because they are visual representations of what you do. Okay, so you know how big of a champion I am for those things. I just want to reinforce that it goes far beyond that as you make an effort to deliver. Does that make sense? I don't want to get too deep on this.
No, I think it's perfect. We're walking through a series right now on The Chosen, and people may have different understandings about the Jesus story, which is The Chosen. I like the character development. I like their sense of creativity. Obviously, they take some liberties from the biblical story, but what it does is it creates an experience for the viewer to put themselves in the shoes of Mary Magdalene hearing your name called by Jesus. And so one of my frustrations is that people may meet Jesus out in the world, watching The Chosen, in a relationship with a friend, over coffee or a beer or something like that. And then what is my next step? And then they could come to one of our churches. And unfortunately, a number of our churches don't carry the Jesus brand. They don't exude joy, acceptance, care, love, hospitality. They're more like country club for members rather than hospital for sinners and all people. And so that is one of my prayers for just the church in general, that there would be a collective boost of the Jesus brand within Catholic to Charismatic and Lutheran and everywhere in between, that all of our churches would ooze more of the feeling, the experience of being with Jesus. Anything to say as we close that conversation?
Yeah, just the first thing that comes to mind is that anytime, much like when we have a positive experience with something, if it goes to a level that exceeds our expectation, we're quick to tell other people. So there's a bit of a Book of Acts sort of narrative here that applies in other areas as well. You referenced the GCU basketball game. A lot of times when people come to a GCU basketball game, they want to invite other people and say, you got to see what's happening here. The power of when the love and forgiveness and salvation that comes through Christ is expressed and communicated in a way that connects, it's very contagious. You just get anxious to share that with other people. And so while you're right that unfortunately so many people carry scars from being introduced, if you will, to an inaccurate representation of faith or Christ in action, I don't think it necessarily behooves those of us that have had a positive experience to step into it and say, come with me. I want to walk with you. And it may not be, the first entry point may not be a church, of course. It's all built through relationship. But over time, then, that trust can be established to then be sort of re-engaged. So that's for what it's worth, that's what comes to mind as I hear you say that.
There's definitely a multiplying impact of a positive brand for sure. We talk a lot about our dreams for our church body changing. And for those of you who are outside the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, we're glad you listened to the American Reformation. But like many mainline church bodies in America, we're declining. So what could our church body, and really every denomination and church in general, learn from GCU to help reverse the trend, decline in members, churches, leaders?
Well, first of all, as you know, I owe my life to Lutheran education, and absolutely believe that that system is worth fighting for. Was a product of it, served in it, champion it. Our kids are part of it. My wife works with it. So it really, your question really hits near and dear to my heart. And I guess if the question is what relationship would what we've learned at GCU have with the Lutheran system? I've gotten to know many leaders within our Lutheran education system, and we've got some amazing leaders who are championing the cause in a remarkable way. And so I think, number one, that we've got remarkable people in our system that I'm so thankful for. I would say some things that we're learning at GCU is that the future seems to be in partnerships. How can we continue to find ways to work together? And I see that within our system. The greatest opportunity, I think, and I'm just speaking as Joe Schmo parishioner here, the greatest opportunity I see is ways in which we could leverage common assets. We have so much opportunity to connect and work together that could be so much more advantageous than the strain of maybe having to work as an independent entrepreneur, if you will. I actually had read, I don't know if you've gotten a chance to see this, is the timeliness of this interview is fascinating. I just finished reading an article that Pat Ferry had put out talking about the Ann Arbor Mequon coming together.
Yeah,
right. It was a fascinating article. And I loved, he highlighted specifically in there the power of working together. You referred to it as a renaissance. That's a great word. The Renaissance was accomplished because a lot of people worked tirelessly together. So I'm just using that as a Lutheran example that I thought was great language. Ways in which we can continue to work and partner and serve the greater good together. The opportunities are endless. It really goes back to your first question, Tim, when you right from the jump, the prayer for our church, John 17, that they may be one, work together. I see so much great opportunity in our school system to continue to do that. Many places are already doing that. Praise God. I mean, the article I just referenced is a good example. But I think many in our system see even more opportunity to continue to do that. And so I know for us that's been really critical, is to find ways to continue to work alongside each other. And I see that happening in our Lutheran schools. And the more that happens, I think would be a great gift to our system.
Couldn't agree more, man. And it sounds like kumbaya and just kind of, but it's powerful. Jesus' prayer for unity on the night that he was betrayed, that the world would know the Father based on the way we cared for one another. And that means diverse opinions, diverse perspectives and experiences, and wrestling with not getting your way all the time, and accommodating one another and putting the best construction on what other people say and do, and working as hard as possible to build bridges with people who have different perspectives about how the church should function and what we should do to reach people and how we should disciple one another. It's going to get messy because human beings are sinful, we're fallen, we're selfish, we want our way. But the Jesus way, if Jesus collaborated, just go back. Eric Fish and I have talked a lot about Luke 10. If Jesus collaborated with the 12, Luke 9, and then with the 70 in Luke 10, how much more so should we ask for help from one another, and recognizing as churches with other churches, organizations, recognized service organizations, RSOs working together. It just is wonderful. For those of us that are within the LCMS, I'm praying for kind of a clearinghouse where a number of different organizations are very clear about what they do well and what they are open to, how they're open to serve, so that there's not competition, there's more collaboration. And it really, at the end of the day, is all about relationship. So I am on the American Reformation and on Lead Time podcast, Ryan. I'm looking forward to conversations with people that I disagree with and can find common ground with, namely in the person and work of Jesus, and then go forward united in the midst of our diverse perspectives, so that the world would bend the knee to Jesus. Any final words, brother? This has been a lot of fun.
Well, you're championing it well, Tim, in that collaborative spirit. No doubt is it biblical, number one, but number two, it allows for even that many more ways for Christ to be at work. So I know we referenced this earlier, and I can't say it enough, that the vision of what can be in place is so critical. And so if the vision, much like the foundation of our system, is focused around growing the kingdom, like it's, I don't want to, again, not to sound overly simplistic, but we can get very institutional, if you will. And sometimes I'm saying collectively, Big C Church, can lose sight of what's the ultimate purpose here. And I think that there's a lot of places and spaces that share that purpose. We may not agree on a myriad of other areas, but how can we get as many people introduced to the saving name and work of Jesus as possible? And in what different deliveries can we do that? The opportunities are immense. And so, but you're right, having the right kind of heart and posture for that is a continual prayer. And I'm so thankful for leaders like yourself. We have them all throughout church and school and our synod that are championing this so boldly. And so you're not alone. There's many of us, myself included, that champion that same effort. So it's exciting, a challenging time, but exciting time, no doubt.
Amen. Hey, Ryan, this has been fun, dude. Thanks for doing it with me.
Right on.
And for being my friend and brother from another mother, and looking forward to growing with you for years and years to come. If people want to connect with you, how can they do so?
Happy to just shoot me an email if that works. I'm on Twitter. I don't do much on there, but I'm on there. I learn a lot on there. So that's just at Bredow Ryan, or you can email me at ryan.bredow@gcu.edu.
You're the man, dude. This is the American Reformation Podcast. Every single week, we're having Jesus theological conversations about how to bring Reformation to the American church. If you like what you heard, please comment, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. It helps us get the word out. We'll see you next week on the American Reformation Podcast. Peace of the Lord. Thanks, Ryan.
God bless you. Thanks, Tim.